We all know that learning a skill is much better when you're younger because kids' brains are literally still like sponges. They still have the highest brain plasticity, and learning new things is easiest when you're young, and it'll really shape you for the rest of your life and can influence your thinking long term. And in a world of quantum computers and artificial intelligence, you don't want your child to fall behind. There's a real risk right now that the skills that kids learn or the career that they decide to pursue is obsolete by the time that they're out of college. Many parents are ahead of the curve and they see the benefits and the potential of teaching kids coding, especially at an early age, to ensure that their child doesn't fall behind and is set up for success instead. But at what age should you be learning to code? Is your child ready for it yet? And what should you do if they're not the right age yet, but you still want them to be prepared for a tech-enabled world? Watch this video to determine if your child is ready to learn coding yet, or if there's something else you should do to support their development. I will tell you what the biggest hurdle for any child is to learn coding so that you can see how you can help your child overcome this hurdle early on. And in this video, I will also give you ideas for 5 activities that your kids can do if they're still a bit too young for actual coding, but that will accelerate their learning and help them get ready. Hi, my name is Oliver. I'm a technology expert and education specialist. I help parents unlock their kids' full potential and turn kids into successful expert coders by teaching them the skill set of software developers and the mindset of tech entrepreneurs. Today, let's talk about a question that I get a lot, and that's at what age should kids start learning to code? And just to be clear, I'm referring to real coding here, the same kind of coding that professionals at big tech companies use. We'll talk about what's a good age to start with that and what educational games or activities are appropriate at other ages instead. See, to answer the question about what age, you have to understand that coding is not just one singular skill, but it's actually many skills put together that will make someone an expert coder. If you're watching this, then you already know how coding teaches problem solving, abstract and analytical thinking, creativity and design, math and logic, engineering, and even some business related skills. In fact, there's a ton of skills that can be derived from coding. But you don't want to frustrate a child who's too young for those complex advanced subjects. You don't want to scare them with it so that they forever adopt the mindset of I'm just not a computer person or coding is way too hard for me, right? Kids' brains are still very impressionable, and while that's great for learning, it can also backfire and really push them away from something that they might otherwise enjoy and perhaps even set them up for success their entire life. So over the last 5 years as a coding teacher, I have generally said that I teach kids between 9 and 12 how to code. And that's mainly because that's the sweet spot. Most of my students are 10 or 11, and what I teach them and how I teach them is just right in terms of where they're at with their development and their interests. A lot of the kids I work with, they've already dabbled in some educational games. They tried maybe the hour of code, or they did maybe some camps that showed them how to modify one of their favorite games. But then many kids start wondering, how do you start something from nothing? What if you want to create your own video game from the ground up? Or like an actual app or website? Not just an educational game that kind of limits your creativity, but the real deal, right? Kids wonder that, and they want to be typing away on a black screen like a hacker, creating something that doesn't exist yet. So it's usually right around that age between 9 and 12 that kids not only have an interest for that, but also that they have the analytical and logical capabilities to figure out and understand what is going on. Like I said, coding is a compounded skill. Many skills put together make you a great coder. And instead of thinking that kids have to learn coding in order to acquire these skills, think of it the other way around. Some of the skills have to be acquired first before you can dive into coding. And one of those skills is reading and writing. So if your child is at an age where they're not yet super fluent with reading things, I would not recommend that you set them up with coding, because that's all that coding is, reading and writing things. So strengthen that skill first and try to find activities that involve reading and writing and that are revolving around some interests of your child, for example, robotics and science fiction. And I'm sure that there's a ton of apps too that help with this, where kids can build words and letters, rearranging stuff and just tapping away on the screen. The next skill required is math. All the basic algebra things like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division need to be understood. Also, decimal numbers and fractions are helpful to know. And if kids have done some number theory before, it also really helps to prepare their brain for the abstract kind of thinking that we use in coding. and very important, geometry and coordinate systems. In fact, making your own video game is basically applied geometry. We use X and Y coordinates, we measure lengths and distances. At some point we also have to look at angles and figure out pi, sine and cosine and so on. And that's where learning to code really feeds into learning these math concepts. Because finally, a topic that seems dry, boring and totally unrelated to everyday real life has an actual application. Video games are nothing but math. So this is totally where the rubber hits the pavement, and there are many activities that your kids can do, even ones that don't require screens. Things that will keep them entertained and that train their brains at the same time. Check out my other video for many ideas. So if your child is good at reading and writing, they have decent math skills and their pattern recognition has been strengthened from all the hands-on activities, then they're pretty much ready to dive into writing their first lines of code. And for most kids, that's going to be between the ages of 7 and 9. But there's still one final hurdle that they need to overcome. The fine motor skills that are required to operate a mouse with precision and click and of course typing. Coding is an activity that's all about the mind, ideas and logic and whatever cool tricks your brain can do. But right now the best interface we have to put those ideas onto a computer are mouse and keyboard. I don't see us having any viable alternatives like voice input or touch screens or motion gestures anytime soon to replace what we're currently doing in the domain of coding. Now, your child might be the generation that eventually builds those, but as of right now, mouse and keyboard is where it's at. And for many kids, that's really the biggest hurdle. If it takes you 2 seconds or more to find one letter on the keyboard, coding will be 100 times more frustrating. It'd be like you're trying to go running, a pretty challenging activity by itself, right? But now you also have shoes that are made of lead and they stick to the ground. So overall, this is the biggest hurdle for kids to start with coding, which is why MIT came up with Scratch. Scratch lets you make actual programs using the same commands we have in coding, but you don't have to type, it's all just drag and drop and everything kind of snaps together like Legos or something. But of course, how can your child improve their typing skills so that they can eventually get to real coding? I really recommend instant messaging and chatting online. Maybe you can set them up with a messenger app that they use on a laptop and use it on your phone, and then you guys can exchange messages back and forth. Of course, they can chat with online friends too, and there's a lot of typing courses out there as well that you can try. And then I got one more activity for you. Let your kids use Paint to draw pictures, okay? That's a program on the computer. On Mac, it would be called Paintbrush. That's something that really trains their fine motor skills for using the mouse, and it's something that we'll need to use to create graphics for our first video games as well. So now you understand why teaching kids younger than 8 how to code won't make that much sense. You know how you can help them improve and solidify the skills that are required to get into coding. And because of how important coding is, I really recommend that you do that. There isn't really an upper age limit for learning to code. I'm sure teenagers and young adults would also enjoy my lessons and learn from them. But you know, who wants to deal with teenagers? I'm just kidding, of course, but really middle schoolers and preteens are at a prime age for learning to code. If you have a child at that age, you can try my free course that teaches kids how to write their first lines of real code, and it motivates and rewards them to keep going so that they can end up making their own video games, apps, and websites. Check it out for free today at cc4k.co. Or watch some of my other videos that tell you what screenless activities you can do with your kids that will make them better at coding. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.